Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are on the planet. And thank you very much to join this webinar. So the webinar today is the fourth of this series of webinars, and it relates to insect farming and feed production. We talk about global trends, benefits, sustainability, and a very important case study. So here we are today. Let me introduce our guest, May Valraven from Innovafeed. May is Head of Business Development at Innovafeed, a French company. We know much more at the end of the presentation with their presentation. And here with me is our outreach manager for the areas of France, German-speaking countries, and Asia, Massimo Bardella, who has been the liaison between Friend of the Sea, Friend of the Earth, and Innovafeed. And I am director of the World Sustainability Organization and of the two projects, Friend of the Sea and Friend of the Earth. Friend of the Sea is a project focused on certification of products from sustainable fisheries and aquaculture, while Friend of the Sea certifies products from sustainable agriculture and farming. Over 1,000 companies around the globe have products certified Friend of the Sea or Friend of the Earth. Let's start with an outlook on insect conservation status. And unfortunately, the news coming to us on from this recent study of 2019 are not so positive. Actually, are quite negative. In fact, a good part of the insect families that we know have been reduced in their populations up to and more than 50%. So this is a very important issue. In fact, we all know that insects are very important in the food chain for all other animals, birds, reptiles, and in the end also humans. So Friend of the Sea and Friend of the Earth in particular have developed in the past years a conservation project to try and save Italian endangered butterflies, and this basically has consisted in ex situ reproduction of endangered butterflies to be then introduced in controlled areas, parks and reserves. And this has involved also citizen science with citizens carrying out a census of Italian butterflies. We would really love to develop further this project, and we are looking for sponsors and companies to support the project in the future. But let's get down to the focus of today's presentation, and let's analyze together some data regarding the global edible insect market, its size and trends, applications and uses. So if we look at the global market of insect-based ingredients, which includes also honey production and silk, which played a major part in this field, we see that it's a growing market which has reached about 11 billion US dollars in value. And more specifically today, we will look at the two fields which are circled here on the slide. So the production of protein for human consumption and the animal feed market. And something curious, apparently, also the part of the global population, those 5 billion people who normally don't eat insects, involuntarily over the year eat up to 1 kilogram of insects. These are found either on some of the food we eat or we just eat them casually. But as we all know, there are some countries and some continents, in particular Asia, Africa, and South America, and Latin America in general, where several countries normally eat insects, as you can see from this image. And up to 2 billion people consume insects regularly in their life. And here you can see some of the major families of insects which are consumed. The major one, the one that plays a major role, is the beetles family, then caterpillars, bees, wasps, and ants. About 1,900 species are eaten worldwide. And the attitudes of consumers globally towards eating insects and their health impact are diverse, but obviously there is a good part which hasn't yet experienced eating insects, and in some cases people have a positive attitude. So this means that with appropriate communication in regard in the future, it is possible that the consumers will have a positive attitude toward eating insects. In this regard, I would like to propose to you a poll that we have prepared, a question that you can answer to, and I'll start it right now. And the question is, have you ever eaten insects or products from farm insects? Feel free to answer during the presentation. Okay, so if you want to continue the presentation, you have to answer and submit. Okay, so now we proceed, and let me just, sorry, I have some technical problems. Okay, I'll have to close this and open up again. Here we are. So I will let now Massimo tell us a bit more about the global edible insect market. Massimo, please.
So, thank you, Paolo. In terms of market value, currently Asia Pacific represents 1/3, followed by Latin America and North America. The market is basically expected to triple in the next 5 years, as you may see from the schedule, and from current $400 million to $1,200 million in 2023. Major categories of edible insects products are, in order of importance, flour, protein bars, and snacks, as you may see. The edible market is growing, and Sainsbury has been the first retailer in Europe in 2018 to launch an edible insect range of products. Also, the pet food industry has become more and more, always more reliable and interesting for this kind of market, and in fact, a quarter of meat and fish globally with a consequent environmental impact can be reduced by using alternative protein source, as in this case. The global insect feed is currently approximately valued $1 billion at the moment, while official market share data is not available. The major target is predominantly aquaculture, but followed by poultry and pet food. Feed composition has changed over the years, as you may see from the schedule, the above part, over the years, with plant proteins substituting fish meal, and oil, now composing approximately 30% of this. Each of them has pros and cons. According to a recent study, insect feed has potential to replace between 10% and 50% of soy meal feed used in poultry and cattle application at the moment. I put you through Paolo once again.
So as far as the legislative developments are concerned, we see three major legal trends. So there are countries like UK, USA, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia where edible insects do not represent a novel food. And so these have not implemented specific legislations for edible insects. The European Union instead has felt the need to introduce rules, regulations, and provide approval before allowing any marketing. And then there are non-Western countries, Asia, Africa, where these insects are often a traditional food, but rarely packaged with a brand or exported. So there isn't really any regulation, any specific regulations on these. So if we look at the EU law applicable to insect farming, there is a number of laws and regulations, the first three that you see here listed, which also include reference to insect production, but the generic laws for hygiene, health are applied. In January 2018, however, a new novel food law has been introduced, and Innovafeed will tell us a bit more also about this specifically, but summing up here, insect derived proteins are today not allowed for use in pig and poultry feed, whereas pet food, for example, pet food for dogs, cats, birds, and reptiles, and farm animals may well be fed with such products. It should be noted that the feed ban does not apply to all insects, as you can see from the slide, nor to insect-derived fats. If we look at the environmental impacts of insect feed production, we have to consider all the different steps of the production, as one normally does for any environmental impact. And here we can see that there are some specific potential impacts, such as, for example, the risk of invasive species being spread in the environment. However, generally speaking, these potential impacts of insect production can be more easily resolved when compared to farming of other species for meat. And if all studies agree that the environmental impact of insect farming is lower than the impact of farming other animals, for example, cow, one should take into consideration, for example, that insects have higher value in percentage in terms of protein and lower fat content. And adding up to that, the farming of the equivalent weight of meat would imply 2,000 times more water, 25 times more feed, and 100 times more greenhouse gases emissions. So obviously there is a benefit for the environment. And this is why in an optic in an outlook to promote products coming from insect farming, a friend of the sea, a friend of the earth, have introduced a year ago requirements for sustainable insect farming, which are here summarized, but of course we will send you a link to the actual requirements and checklist for your further review. And they are structured with the following categories and covering the following potential impacts. So there are requirements for both environmental and social impacts, use of hazardous substances, for example, welfare of the animal, water resources, air resources, waste management, energy management, as well as social accountability. The first company which has been certified Friend of the Sea for insect farming is Innovafeed. So I pass the word and the presentation to Innovafeed for providing us an outlook on their experience, on the potential of their production, and
thank you, Carlo. Thank you, Massimo. So at Innovafeed, we have decided to invest in insects to replace it in its natural spot in nature, meaning that we're exploiting its ability to feed on low-value biomass and using it as high-quality ingredients to feed animals. So in nature, a lot of small animals like piglets, poultry, even fish feed on insects, and we've decided to deploy a new industry to create those novel ingredients. So at Innovafeed, we actually cover several steps of the value chain. We formulate the seeds for the insects ourselves. We cover the breeding, the reproduction of the insects, as well as the final transformation into two types of products. Firstly, a protein made of the insect, as well as a oil made of the insect, which we commercialize for aquaculture as well as agricultural and to some extent on the pet food market. We have decided to focus most of our efforts on aquaculture because due to the tremendous growth of this sector in the past couple of years, a new challenge has emerged, which is the supply of high quality proteins to feed fish. And like a lot of other animals that are traditionally farmed, fish are carnivorous, and as a result, they need high quality protein. While fish meal and soy meal have been premium ingredients that have supported the growth of aquaculture so far, they both have their limitations, and therefore the industry has been looking for new alternative ingredients, and insects can be one of these solutions. So Innovafeed has, over the past couple of years, validated the potential of a specific species called Hermesia illucens, also referred to as the black soldier fly, to test its nutritional quality and ensure that it could be produced in a competitive way as a new source of protein to aquaculture. To Innovafeed, it was essential that the production model that we were designing was virtuous. So we have based ourselves on circular economy to create a closed-loop model. We are recycling co-products of the agro industry, therefore not impacting resources. And we're also recycling the dejection of the insects as fertilizer for agriculture, therefore functioning in very short loop. That enables us to have actually minimal impact on the environment. We have a reduced carbon footprint compared to traditional sources of protein, and as well lower impact on natural resources. We also place a we also are very committed to animal welfare as we develop this new industry. While there is very little scientific evidence about insects experiencing any kind of pain or suffering, we at Innovafeed apply the precautionary principle. just in case they do. And we have based our approach on Bramble's 5 freedoms for animals, which basically makes sure that our insects are free from hunger and thirst, they're free from discomfort, they're free from injuries, pain and disease, free from fear and distress, as well as free to express their natural behavior. We have 3 commitments. The first one is to ensure that our insects feel at home and we have the optimal environmental conditions that mimic their natural environment. We make sure that we look after the health and well-being of our insects through the highest quality of feed, as well as making sure they are not exposed to diseases. And finally, we do everything to provide them a stress-free life, and that comes through minimizing the human interactions, as well as ensuring that the methods we use to harvest them limit the potential suffering of our larvae. We commercialize 3 products from our insect rearing activity. 2 products come from the larvae, so that's the protein part, which we use for agriculture, as well as the oil part, which we commercialize for both piglets and poultry, thanks to its antimicrobial properties. And then finally, we also commercialize the byproducts, which are the digestion of the insects as an organic fertilizer, mainly for organic crops. So Paolo talked a little bit about the benefits of using insects. We strongly believe that the protein that we produce has benefits across 3 axes. So first of all, it's a very high quality ingredient for fishes, thanks to its high protein content, which has been validated through trials both in R&D stations and at commercial scale. It has a positive impact on health because of the very short life cycle of insects. They do not accumulate any unwanted substances, and our insects are 100% GMO free. On the naturality axis, a lot of the fish in nature actually feed on insects. For instance, trout's diet is made up of insects at 75%. And then finally, we believe there's a strong sustainability benefit, which is enabled by our local production and circular economy model, but also because we're replacing other raw materials and therefore limiting the impact on resources. There's also benefits on the end product. So we've been working both with third-party laboratories as well as with chefs to assess the quality on the flesh of the fish. And we have found that on trout, the feed, including insect meal, enabled a deeper pigmentation of the fillets as well as a more firm and juicier texture, which were both positive aspects for end consumers. And chefs tend to very much appreciate working with fish that has been fed with insects. In France, we have launched last year a very special partnership with Auchan Retail, where we actually feed their trout with a diet including insect meal. This partnership has enabled us to work with different actors of the value chain, which were pioneers in this initiative. I highly encourage you to go find out more about this initiative on our website, nouetansinsect.com, where we explain all of the details. And you can find in the stores, thanks to the label, the trout that have been fed with insects. This was a world's first. It had never been done before, so we were very proud of this initiative. Currently, Innovafeed operates a pilot plant in the north of France. This pilot plant is state-of-the-art in terms of zoo technical and industrial know-how. It is also energy optimized and zero waste. And it was extremely important for us to ensure the highest quality, safety, and ethical standards from the very beginning. This is why we partnered with Friends of the Sea and Friends of the Earth, which we got certified last year, because as an infant industry, we want to, from the very start, adhere to the very highest standards. As a matter of fact, we are already extended our capacity. We are in the process of building a second plant, which will have a much larger capacity and will be built in industrial symbiosis with a partner, Tereos, which is a starch producer. By co-locating our next factory with this starch factory, we can actually use their co-products directly to feed our insects and therefore optimize logistical costs as well as optimize synergies and therefore have the best possible impact on the environment, avoiding up to 25,000 tons of CO2 per year, which is the equivalent of removing 40,000 cars off the road. But our plans will not stop there. In order to meet the needs of aquaculture and the other industries that were mentioned by Massimo, we have the plan to extend quite rapidly. Once our pilot plant will be at scale functioning in early 2020, we will be launching the construction of 5 new plants to be operational by 2022, both in Europe and in the US. So feel free to contact us if you have more questions at the email address here, and happy to answer questions today as well.
Well, thank you very much, May, and thank you all for listening. Let's see if there are some questions out there. I see the red dot, and William asked a question for May. Do you have a regulatory or accreditation system for the residual frass? May, that's for you.
Sure. So frass, as other animal dejections, can be used as an organic fertilizer. So we have to abide by the same regulation. Because it is a new raw material, the European Commission has encouraged different countries to set hygienization methods. So in France, we actually have to compost our frass before we can use it, but the regulations are still in the process of being made at the European level, so they are bound to evolve over time.
So I see another question. I don't know if this is something you can answer, or it's a bit a strange question.
No, so we are.
Why is Innovafeed working with Barents in pet food industry?
So we, as I mentioned, work with different end markets. We work mainly in aquaculture, but we also have a very successful collaboration with Barents on the pet food for feeding cats and dogs.
Could you confirm, another question, could you confirm where insects could be used in Europe?
So insects can, there are different regulations for different parts of the insect. So the insect protein can be used in aquaculture and in pet food. The insect fat can be used in aquaculture, pet food, as well as poultry and pig feed. And the live insects can also be used across all 4 markets. Once you have the actual sanitary agreement, and if you abide by all of the regulation in terms of health and safety, then it can be basically commercialized in any country in Europe.
And then we have a question from retail chain. Are you working with any food service or retail operators to use their waste as input?
So a lot of companies are looking into that. The real challenge with using retail operators' waste is that they vary from 1 week to the next in quality and in what composes those waste streams, which makes it very hard to have an actual constant product and to ensure the quality of the output, which is our protein and our oil. So we have made the choice to use agricultural byproducts, which are also actually waste. They're just a different kind of waste that's a little bit less visible to the general consumer. But that way we have no impact on natural resources.
And then how do you validate the CO2 reduction from the facility, May?
So we have asked an independent third party called iCare to conduct a life cycle analysis. So basically, when we use the byproducts of our partner agricultural facility, we enable them to save on energy, which they generally use for treating those byproducts. And therefore, we avoid about 25,000 tons of CO2 emissions per year.
And then again, a question for you: when will substantial volumes more than 100 tons be available?
So, as I mentioned, we're currently in the process of building our full-scale plant, which will be operational starting December of this year. It will have a capacity of 10,000 tons, so it will the actual capacity will ramp up over the first quarter of 2020.
There's a more generic question about Africa, and can you please develop more on insect protein used in Africa, where over 300 million people are starving? Well, the data that we found are showing that, yes, Africa, in terms of diversity of insects which are consumed, eaten, has the highest diversity, and one of the highest number of countries which are actually eating insects. However, from the value statistics, it shows that, for example, compared with Asia, the actual production value is very low. So obviously, there isn't an organized insect farming industry, and it would be interesting also to hear from May if there is a possibility in the future to some kind of knowledge transfer in this area to support the development of the industry there too. What do you think, May?
Yeah, so there's actually one of our competitors which is based in South Africa, which has launched a similar project. What we see in Africa is that there's a very strong growth of aquaculture, in particular around tilapia and catfish, and insects could be a great source of protein for those fish. Enabling to reduce the reliance on fish meal, which currently has to be imported, and due to import tax as well as the currency volatility, often has a very high incidence on the cost of feeding fish in Africa. So we're looking at several projects in Africa as well to feed fish and help produce lower cost and higher quality fish in Africa.
Another question for you, May. You're very busy today. Could insect farming be used to process all organic wastes universally?
So it's a great question. There are other companies that have actually focused on using insects for the purpose of recycling or processing organic waste. It's at the moment a little bit of a different business model because these insects then cannot be used as feed in any industry that will go into the human food chain. So as Paolo had shown that slide earlier with the regulations, insects have to be fed today with 100% vegetal raw materials. We cannot feed any meat to our insects. So that's kind of the barrier. But some companies are focusing solely on the intrinsic value of insects to recycle and process bio-waste.
Then there's a question about the if you can talk about the financial viability of insect protein, considering it is directly competing with commodity products like fish meal and soy meal. Before the meeting, we spoke a little bit about the fluctuating fish meal prices. Maybe you can elaborate from there, man.
So there are indeed the objective in order to enter the market is to be competitive with these raw materials. At the moment, the main obstacle for that is scale. So all of the actors of the insect industry are working at building scale and increasing the production capacity so that we can be competitive. So that is definitely the objective and the target. At the moment, what we have tried to do is to build value chains that enable our partners, which are pioneers, to actually generate more value. So for instance, the partnership we have with Auchan enables to create value for the retailer, which he can then share with the different partners in the value chain.
And on our side, as friend of the sea, as we believe that it is very positive and alternative, beneficial to the environment and lower impact, we are also networking and introducing this newly available product to feed producers and also to aquaculture producers, as we have specific requirements for feed in our friend of the sea standards and requirements for certification of sustainable aquaculture. So we hope that also gradually this will lead to an increased value and appreciation from the market. I believe that we almost run out of questions. Maybe last one, is research happening into the omega-3 content of potential insects for culture? Could certain insects provide the omega-3 requirements of marine fish? I think somehow it has been answered, but maybe May, you want to add something?
So indeed, in comparison to fish meal, insect meal does not contain any omega-3, which is one of the limitations. However, there are alternative ways of producing omega-3, such as through algae or through some crops. And there's a lot of research and some great projects that are happening on that topic. When it comes to actually trying to produce omega-3 through insects, well, there is the opportunity to feed insects with omega-3 rich feed, such as algae. We have noticed that the insects will only ingest part of it, and therefore a lot of it goes to waste and goes into the digestion. So we have made the choice instead to defast our insect meal so that other sources of omega-3 can be brought to fish feed through the oil fraction of the feed.
Well, thank you very much, May, and thank you, everybody. I'm really glad that this webinar has led to such an interest, and we have had almost 100 registrations, and we passed the information to all of you about the webinar. And would like you to save the date for the next webinar, which will be held on the 29th of May, and it's going to be related to sustainable aquaria. Yes, the public aquaria, they can also have an impact on the environment and on some specific species, and they can also be valuable to promote awareness about marine conservation. So recently, Friend of the Sea certified the first sustainable aquarium, the Aqua Rio, in the aquarium Rio, which is the biggest aquarium in South America. More information, you will receive the invitation, and I hope to see you back there again. So again, a great thanks and applause, and thank you very much to May, and thank you to Innovafeed for this very positive collaboration, and to Massimo for his collaboration and his liaison with the company. Thank you very much. We'll be in touch.
My name is May Wool-Raven. I'm in charge of business development at Innovafeed. Innovafeed is a biotech company which produces ingredients based on insect rearing. We are located in France, where we operate our pilot factory since 2017. We have reached out to Friends of the Sea to get environmental certification last year. We worked together with the team at Friends of the Sea and Friends of the Earth to come up with new standards for insect production and particularly sustainable insect production. We have obtained the certification late last year. It's very important for Innovafeed to make sure that we meet the highest possible standards in terms of environment as well as social impacts. So we were very happy to collaborate with Friends of the Earth and Friends of the Sea on this project. We think it will bring a lot of value in the future and look forward to continue working together.